Hello, everyone. Today I have Ken Eslick. He's the founder and CEO of the Leaders Lab. They are 10-year-old. He just recently completed 10 years. Congratulations, Ken. They are a B2B services focused leadership executive search firm based in New York City. Ken, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks, Manan. Good to be here.
Well, it's really my pleasure. So Ken, you completed 10 years. That's a big milestone for anybody to achieve. We all know how brutal recruiting is as a business. So congratulations. Love to understand the growth, the evolution over the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I sort of feel like we're still brand new because I'd say I was in the corporate world and I left about 10 years ago. And when I did, I always had it in the back of my mind. I was on the other side of the fence, so I would hire recruiters and some were not very good and they charged high fees and they didn't really know our business. And grass is greener, right? I kind of looked at it and went like, oh, I could jump in here and do a lot better. And the fees are pretty good. And so when I left corporate, I jumped in. And in some ways I was right. I think I had a certain amount of experience, not in recruiting, but in leadership in my industry that I could leverage. But what I didn't do, which is crazy because I know better, is I didn't find like a mentor. I didn't really have any peers in the business. So I just kind of went at it by myself and did okay. But I feel like I sort of bought myself a job in a way, and then it's been really since COVID where it's been like, okay, let's kick this thing into gear. And we've been growing a lot the last couple of years.
Okay. So what has that growth been like in terms of, whatever numbers that you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah. So I mean, this will be our first year exceeding $1 million. And so the last 2 years we've doubled each year.
Wow.
But we were sort of flatlined in that, 300K. We had some 400K years. I mean, our growth line just sort of looked like a boring stock.
Yeah.
It was neither up nor down. It was just like sitting there. And I don't want to say I was okay with it, Manan, because I wasn't happy with those kind of results. It didn't excite me to go to work every day, but at the same time, I wasn't really doing anything about it. I was kind of stuck. I didn't know exactly where to go. And so COVID provided, I think, I don't know, in some ways for all the tragedy it's caused, it's also was a time for like reflection, gave us the space to kind of regroup, gave us the time to do that as well.
Okay. So that's interesting. So I want to go deeper over there, right? Like what changed in COVID, right? Like COVID, we are talking about 2020, about 2 years back. So by then it had already been 8 years since you started Leaders Lab. What kicked you into action?
So we went from having our best first quarter in the beginning of 2020 to $0 and 0 cents of revenue starting, March 15th or so, like everybody, or like a lot of people, I guess. So if I was going to stay in recruiting or have a good business in 2020, I would have had to pivot to a different industry and start placing like, Amazon workers or something, something that was in demand, or kind of regroup. And so we chose to regroup. So our company used to be called Summit Careers. We rebranded it. We defined our niche. I read a ton. I mean, I just did a lot of different things. Ultimately, found a guy named James Blackwell. One thing that I knew was that automation would be the way to go. I always knew that. In fact, I tried it. Again, no mentor, no blueprint, no path. And so I would try these things. People talked about hiring VAs. So I would go on Upwork, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was hiring VAs from my own country, which is kind of ridiculous because they're not all that great. They charge a lot. But I had the intuition, I guess, to know that was the way. I just didn't know the way. So I started kind of looking around for people programs, training, things like that, where I could find someone younger than me that's maybe done it from an industry standpoint, because I knew my niche, but I don't know the industry. Even 10 years in now, or 8 years at the time, I didn't really know recruiting. I mean, I knew what I had done, and we had discovered some pretty cool things, but I didn't know a lot about the business. And so I really need to surround myself with people like that. And I thought that person would be, or people or network would be younger than me. I'm pretty good with tech, but they would be more tech savvy than me. They would have been down this road before, so that I don't have to like reinvent the wheel. And so we did it from the ground up. We literally just, and if you're saying, what kind of caused it, I mean, literally because of COVID, it's like I had nothing to do but think about this. Like, normally you want to do stuff like this, but you're like, well, I've got this job that I've got to fill, right? Or I've got all these things on my to-do list, and we never get to building the business. And to me, it was kind of like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. I mean, I have this sort of decent income, but I'm a slave to this business. I was definitely working in the business every single day. And so that was kind of the great reset, and allowed us to kind of rebuild everything as if we had never really done it before.
Interesting. So you basically, went from being a recruiter to actually being a CEO, and being an individual contributor, and being an operator, actually thinking in terms of systems, playbooks, and enabling others to deliver, right?
Yes. And what I forgot to tell you was I thought for sure, like I was saying earlier, that even if it worked, I would give up revenue short term, right? And that to me is still something. If I was doing it again, I'd be like, yeah, you should plan to give up some revenue if that's the shift you're going to make. But we didn't. I mean, we just didn't. I think the speed at which we executed, combined with the speed at which the market was coming back, combined with the people on my team really stepping up, my wife being the biggest one that really stepped up, all of those things aligned, and it was like the dip never even happened.
Wow.
Which is beautiful. Like, I was like, cool. I would like to be not missed at all. I would like this thing to function without me,
Yeah. No, and we have to take those decisions every day, right? Like for somebody like us, right? Like a new salesperson, it always takes 2 to 3 months for somebody to ramp up, even if they are a great salesperson, right? And it's difficult for in a recruiting job, in a sales job, to hit the ground running. But it's important for them to make mistakes, learn from them, and in that process, we will lose business, right? So then that's
right.
okay. That is, I know that is a difficult reality to accept for founders, but that's just how it works, right? So I understand that. There is something very interesting that you've done at Leaders Lab, right? So you hire leadership positions, right? Like this is a very niche, super high value, set of people, and almost everybody in your team, they don't really have recruiting experience. Why is that? What does your internal hiring framework look like?
So I didn't know at the beginning. So the reason I didn't have experience at the beginning is because I just wasn't from the industry. So it wasn't like I had some big wise plan, that I put into action. I think now what I'm looking for is maybe different than what people typically look for. I mean, I think the way to test out for a recruiter, if you're looking at a personality test in the past, was probably very similar to like an outside sales rep, right? Like super money motivated, which is still important. And but I'm finding that, like, are you familiar with the DISC profile?
No.
Where they have like, you've probably seen something similar where like D is like your driver score, I is interpersonnel score, C is control and things like that, and S is stability, right? So typically, if you look at those 4 things, the sales rep is going to be very high I, so talking all the time, very gregarious, outgoing, all of that, usually with some D. So they're usually very high I, like on a scale of 1 to 100, like your top sales reps can be like a 98 on an I scale, right? And then if they're good, they're also going to have a decent amount of D. So maybe like a 60 in D. because that means they're going to ask for the order. They're not just going to talk and all of that, but they're going to try to close stuff. The C and the S is more about like paperwork, policy, procedure, and sales reps don't generally want to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the beef with sales reps is like, and they're kind of cocky about it. They're like, look, I just brought you all this business, make someone else do that. And in a way, they're kind of right. Like if we can just focus them on, But I think the more that we get into automation and systems-based recruiting, we still need people that are gregarious. We still need people that are money hungry as well. I want people that are motivated by incentives. But I actually need them to be very detail oriented. I need them to be, I can hire VAs to do a lot of stuff, but if we're sourcing, let's say 150 candidates for a recruiter every week, there's only so much automation we can put in, right? There's things they need to manage their conversations. They need to manage their, there's I think a big combination, like the perfect combination to me of a recruiter would be highly detail oriented, highly money motivated at the same time, and obviously good with the candidates. I hired somebody just like that in October, and she's made 6 placements for us already. Not coming from the industry at all, working from home as a mom, and she's killing it. And I expect her to get to 3 or 4 a month by the end of this year. But she's at a point where you'd expect her to be making maybe her first or second placement right now, know. Yeah. So, but she fits that profile that I just talked about, like exactly.
Very interesting.
The tricky thing about testing someone, like if I actually just looked at their score, just because someone's capable, I'll give you an example. I test out very high D, very high I, very low, I forget which one. My S and C are not strong on paper.
Yeah.
But here I am creating, leveraging, implementing all these systems. So I'm quite capable of it. I know it's not where I'm going to go to naturally, right? If I'm at a party, you can identify people by their SCDI profile in a way, right? Yeah. Drivers making things happen. The I is the social butterfly, right? The S just wants to know what's going on, what time is everything going to happen, things like that. So, and C is like mom, right? Yeah. Wants to make sure no one gets in trouble. So for like, I'll give you an example. For a VA absolutely to me must have a high C score. Must. Like if they're high I, high D, they're probably not going to, and low C as a VA, they're not going to be a good VA. They might be good at leading a team of VAs, but if you just need one VA, that's going to be very tough because a lot of times we need that for is like process oriented stuff, data, all of that. But if someone's high D, high I, it doesn't mean they can't do those things. It just means they have to recognize that it's not a natural strength for them. And so to me as a business owner, I don't feel like I had systems in place to make people successful before. So I don't look at people and go, well, why were they unsuccessful or successful or whatever? I sort of look at it and go, I didn't, it's my job to provide an environment or help create an environment to allow those that are capable of succeeding to succeed, right? To make it easy, to remove obstacles and barriers and all of that. And I didn't do that. Our one and only means of client out or candidate outreach pre-COVID was LinkedIn. That's it. LinkedIn and InMail, very expensive. That was it. Like if they didn't respond, they didn't respond. So all the good candidates that didn't log on to LinkedIn in time, sorry, the opportunity's gone. And that's not a good system. And a recruiter isn't really going to bring you the new system, and nor should I expect them to, right? They're not going to tell me that. So yeah, where I'm at right now with folks that have worked with us before and even ourselves is we now have to assimilate, acclimate to this new norm.
Sure.
Right? If you're able to do that combined with having a high sales personality, then you should do really, really well. If you can't, then it might not be the best place for somebody to work long term because it's going to feel boxed in, right? Like some sales reps, if you give them too much admin, they feel boxed in,
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I know it's a difficult transition to make. Okay, changing gears a little bit. So you talked about earlier you talked about picking a niche and pivoting to where you are right now. Now let's look at next 3 years, right? So let's say you keep on doubling, which is a crazy growth rate anyway. So but let's say you keep on doubling over 3 years, which means you are 8x the size, and you are presented with you have actually, just by the nature of the beast, you have basically two options in front of you, right? Like you keep on doing leadership with your core B2B services as an industry, um, or and find new clients to keep the same pace of growth, or you say that, okay, I already have this company as a client now. I'm already doing leadership. Let's do middle management. Let's do that kind of a thing. So two choices, right? Like increase the number of logos that you have versus increase the revenue that you get from each logo. What would you choose and why?
You're not probably going to love this answer. I'm going to say both in a way. First of all, let's talk about like expanding your footprint within the current customer, because I think there's never been a better time to do that right now for everybody, for any recruiter. Here's what I say to every single job right now from our existing clients. So let's say someone calls up and they say, I need somebody with an MBA in Chicago that's managed at least 100 people and a P&L of $20 million for at least 5 years, right? Let's just say that's what they're looking for. And I'll say, okay, Manan, great, we can do that for you. I think I understand everything. We go through all the questions, right? We figure it out. And what I'll say is, hey, in our search, right, we're searching, if you looked at a dartboard, your candidate is the center of the bullseye, right? There are 100, sorry, I live in New York. I don't know if you can hear the sirens, but center of the bullseye is 100 million or 100 people, 20 million P&L, MBA, Chicago, within 10 miles of the city center. That's the center of the bullseye, right? That's what you want. They go, yeah, that's what I want. Okay, what do you want me to do if I find somebody with all of that experience, but they don't have a bachelor's degree? Because I saw on your website that you have this other position that looks like it's 1 or 2 levels below this. And I use this word all the time. I don't know why, but I always say, do you want me to throw them out? Because it just sounds so dramatic, right? Do you want me to discard them? Do you want me to throw them out? And like everybody needs talent right now. So they never say like, yes, throw them out. And so I'll go, would you be willing to look at them, as well? And they'll go, yeah, but I really want you to fill, I got it. I know that we are being contracted and retained to fill this spot, target of the bullseye. We'll charge a retainer. We'll set the contract on that spot, but we will send candidates for these other 1, 2, 3 positions as well. And you can pay us contingent upon those. So I think there's just so much opportunity like that where you don't have to necessarily change your niche, switch lanes, go from operations to sales, or go from leadership to temp workers or whatever. I think you can just say, hey, while I'm doing it, how about all these people that come along with it, right? Because there's always those candidates that are like, oh man, if they just had this open, or, this guy's a little overqualified, a little underqualified. And so we're trying to just expand the net a little bit without changing our niche completely. That said, I'm strongly considering going into some executive sales positions as well right now within our, just because there's such a demand. I've just got to figure out how to set it up internally. So that might be another step for us. In terms of landing new candidates or landing new clients, we're looking more for people with a national footprint here in the US that can overlap where we're already. So major markets in the US, same niche, same verticals, all of that. And then we'll take the same process. At least that's how I'm thinking about it right now. But we're not looking to dramatically leave our lane, but just maybe, again, just grab the fringes a little bit while we stay in it.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, because the reason why I ask this question is is that, your success in scaling recruiting as a business is highly dependent on how efficiently you can increase collision rate, right? Like when I say collision,
Yes.
what I mean is that you have, I give you a candidate and I give you a client, right? Like how often can you match them, right? Like, so that collision rate is very important, and there are multiple ways of going about it. But again, right, like if it is very hard to do that when you hire across functions, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're hiring sales
Well,
and
there's that tendency.
engineering, it's difficult.
Well, and we did the same thing. I see new recruiters do it all the time. I did the same thing where you just don't want to say no to anything because you got to eat, right? So you're like, someone's like, can you hire a process engineer? I'm like, I don't know anything about that. I have no business saying yes to that job. I really don't. But I probably would have said yes, but now there's absolutely no way. I mean, I'm not networked in that industry. I got to start from scratch. It doesn't make any sense. You'll never build a business. So I'm not knocking anybody for doing what they got to do to make something happen, especially early on in their business. But if that becomes a pattern, I remember people. I keep saying I didn't have mentors early on, but I read some things that I ignored for sure. You know what I mean? Like I read that it was smart to tighten your niche, and I was like, that tight? Like it just seemed crazy to me. Like how. But yeah, we're very, very specific, and it works because then you can be an expert in your field. Then you have talent that you can recycle to other. Recycle is maybe not a great word, but reappropriate to somebody else and all of that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually one of the most fascinating things that I have learned in this industry as well, right? Like as we get to work with a very large spectrum of staffing businesses, and what we have consistently seen is that the larger, the more successful staffing businesses are much more efficient at acquiring a new logo, as well as so their number of customers that they work with per recruiter is much lower, right? So they work with fewer customers, but they make much more money from those same set of customers than smaller and slower recruiting businesses do. And this was the most insane thing that I have seen businesses that are half the size and have acquire more customers than a business that is double their size, and which kind of blew my mind. And I was like, how the hell is this possible? And which is where I started thinking very deeply about what makes this business tick. And what makes this tick is you increasing your chances of having that collision, and mathematically, right, like the smaller the space, more chances you have of that random particle collisions, right? So it's
I'm sorry. I had an analogy of what you're talking about that I thought of, and it's I would compare it. This is going to sound a little weird at the beginning, but I would compare it to like the screen printing business, like when you go to get T-shirts printed.
Yeah, okay.
If you go to get one T-shirt printed and you want like the Recruiterflow logo, how much is that going to run you for one?
I don't know, $10, $15,
and maybe even more, because they've got to set the whatever it's called. They've got to set your ink trays and all of that, right? They've got to create the logo. They've got to do everything. Now, if you go and get 50 of them printed, then the cost comes way down because they've built this level of efficiency, right? And they can pass it along. I would say the same thing with this. Like if a client calls us, even if they're in our niche, but maybe they have a different job, or maybe we don't know them, we don't know how they pay, all the time and effort it takes to understand this little 100-person company or 50-person company or whatever it is the same time and effort it takes me to understand a 30,000 employee company, right? And I've still got to build the ink trays. I've still got to do all of that. for probably a very similar percentage. Maybe I charge them a little bit more because they're smaller, but it doesn't offset all the costs and time and everything that I had going into it, right? So yeah, we're definitely speaking the same language there. To me, it's going to be really national customers that we can get repeat business from that overlap with other national customers.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So Ken, I asked this question to everybody. I think I know your answer, but what is that one, one book, one podcast, or anything that you would recommend to our listeners that has had an outside?
I think the Recruiterflow podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
I wish.
I met you through a guy named James Blackwell. James has a program. My eyes suck, so I put it in your chat for you if you want to share it with anybody. But he's got a program called the Recruiter Accelerator Program, and that was the guy I found. And I can't remember if they found me or if I was just looking for like automation for recruiting companies or what. I had tried a couple different things, but like I said, I had that appointment with him in late July, and I just, they do a couple of calls a week where you just get to exhaust your questions of him and any other recruiter that's on there. And right away I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, I didn't know what it was that I needed. I just knew I was in search of it. And then I was like, okay, this is my group. And then James has a couple other programs. So I kind of went through that starter program with him. And then he's got like an elite group of recruiters. There's maybe 25 of us that most of us should all be into 7-digit recruiting now, or we're getting close. And, James brought us together. It's James' program, but, I get a lot out of those guys too. We're just constantly trading ideas and stuff like that. And so I'll never turn back. I mean, I feel like every call with these guys, I have a notepad. I actually take notes on my iPad, and I'm just like ready to go. I'm like, who's going to say something today that's going to change my business? And so it's been really good to be with them. So I've read some other books and things like that, but nothing's had the impact that group has had for me.
Very interesting. I'll make sure I put that link in the description on YouTube. And lastly, Ken, I would love to understand so you've been with Recruiterflow now 6 months more, right? So
about 6, yep.
Yeah. So if you can tell our listeners how we have helped you grow, scale, and what made you pick Recruiterflow in the first place?
James was suggesting it, and I was a newbie, and I was like, again, I'm there to learn. I was like the perfect student. I was like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they said, go check this out. So I did a little demo with you. Yeah. I liked what I saw. It seemed very intuitive. Things were where I expected them to be, a lot of dragging and dropping and things that, and I was like, yeah, this is cool. I think I can figure this out pretty quickly. And I did. Within, a few days, I had our base system up, meaning I had our jobs inputted. We didn't have a real ATS to move candidates over from, so I wasn't super worried about doing that, but I got jobs set up. Your team, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on the podcast, I say this in the chat to them all the time. I'm not shy about asking for help when I need it, and I'm constantly 2-3 times a week with your team. I'm like, and the thing that I've loved the most about you guys is not just the response, like, oh, someone will get with you shortly, but I mean, actual answers, or you jumping in and going, that's a great idea. I feel like you guys are still small enough to where I'm actually having an impact on the direction of the product to some degree, right? Or as a customer. So anyway, we first just got all that base stuff set up. So jobs, got my recruiters in there. And then we started looking for different things. So I got my careers page set up. You guys were awesome with that. You did some specific programming to make that look better on my site, which I thought was really, really cool. I just can't imagine. I didn't expect that kind of service ever from like a software provider. And so lately we've done a bunch of other things. So I'm getting to the point now where, how sometimes when you're working with a piece of software and they go, here's update, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh God, I don't want to read that, right? Like, I don't even read it for my iPhone. I'm not going to read it. I'm like, someone will tell me about it. But now I'm kind of like reading your updates and I'm going, okay, cool. Like, what did they put in right now? And most recently, you guys did a Ring Central integration. And oh my gosh. So I went out, I've got Ring Central set up. There's a Ring Central plan that records calls for you automatically. So I can call someone from, I can have a recruiter. I'm in New York. I can have a recruiter in California or anywhere in the world. They make an outbound call to a candidate. It records them automatically, not because I want to be Big Brother, but when's the last time I sat in on what this guy's actually saying on the phone to our candidates? And he needs support and help and all of that. Not singling you out, Dylan, if you're watching this. You were the furthest guy from me. But I don't know, that's just amazing to me, right? And like texting through there and having automatically timestamp your phone calls, your texts, and everything like that. So we started email campaigns a few weeks ago through you guys for our candidates. So, we're doing email lookups, and then everybody that comes in our system that is sourced from LinkedIn is getting emailed immediately. Then they're going into, different stages that we set up. So I'm kind of rambling on, but I would say we've implemented all of that. And I still feel like there's a lot of functionality, like with recipes and things like that. It's probably going to be the next step that we take to take Recruiterflow even further. But I guess the thing I like the best about it, Manad, is the team and that the product is growing as I'm growing right now. So my business doesn't, we're growing fast. We're not going to look the same a year from now. I know that you guys aren't either.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm guessing we're both going to look a lot better. So
yeah, let's amen to that. So no, yeah, I mean, you're right. So most of our roadmap is just driven by users feedback. I think that's the best way to build a lasting product. And really, one of the things that we like to do is really deeply get into our users' business in terms of understanding why they need certain things. We to anybody who's listening, one of the frameworks that I follow here is JTBD, which is job to be done. So we kind of like ask 4 whys, right? Like, hey, when Ken says I want this, why do you need that? What does it do for you, right? Like at the end of the day, when you go 4 or 5 whys deeper, you start understanding like what impact that particular feature, if implemented or not, will have, and on what set of customers, and that basically decides a lot of our roadmap, and that is the reason why we've been able to keep Recruiterflow as a extremely easy to use as a product, but still pack a lot of power under the hood, right? So
one of the things that you changed that's exactly along what you're talking about is I was calling you about, and not to be too specific, but there was a thing in how our jobs linked and what the language was that it would say, right? So by default, jobs usually say apply. But when we're working with a candidate, we didn't want it to say that because they're not really applying yet. They're just applying to us. So you got in there, but you asked me like probably 5 or 10 questions, and then you went like, yeah, okay, yeah, well, we can do that on our next programming update. And then I just noticed in your update last month, I think that's now a programmable change for everybody, right? Yeah. Like anybody can change that. Yeah. So it was cool to see that like kind of started with us, and then maybe you had that request again or understood the logic and were able to implement it for everybody. It was really cool.
Yeah, no, that's basically how we deal with most things, right? Like, that's the only way we know how to grow. So
yeah.
No, fantastic. Ken, you've been a delight to speak with, and again, thank you so much for coming on. And for listeners, I will put Ken's LinkedIn in the description below. So if you want, you are okay with people reaching out to you, Ken?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Of course. Yeah, and if you want to know, I'm not on commission or anything, but I do highly recommend James' program. So if you want that link or whatever, hit me up on LinkedIn and I'll give it to you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ken.
Okay, cool. See you. Good to see you. Bye.